Hello, Why Religion friends. John Hilton here. Several years ago, I gave a talk that focused on how when we keep the commandments, we're blessed. I thought it was a great talk. But afterwards, a woman handed me a note that said in part, if the righteous are blessed and find success, how come I have failed in every aspect of my life, no matter how hard I've tried and how good I've been? Her words have never left me. I realized my talk wasn't that great after all. I'd done a fine job of teaching about the blessings of obedience, which are real. But I hadn't talked about how, in Elder Holland's words, some blessings come soon, some blessings come late, and some don't come until heaven. Scripture provides numerous examples of people whose lives did not turn out the way they might have hoped. Yes, Alma the Younger repented, but Laman and Lemuel brought no such happiness to their father. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego escaped death, but Abinadi was not so lucky. While the sons of Mosiah had great missionary success among the Lamanites, Mormon watched the Lamanites destroy his people. The reality is, sometimes things do not work out for the righteous in mortality. Even the greatest people often face horrific trials that do not go away. And although this is not a pleasant concept, better understanding how those with difficult lives are able to find strength in Jesus Christ can bring us great peace. Today, we'll be learning about a woman named Nancy Naomi Tracy. She witnessed miracles in Kirtland, endured persecution in Nauvoo, and faced relentless hardship on the Pioneer Trail and in Utah. But despite constant poverty, loss, and disappointment, she never abandoned her belief in Jesus Christ. Her life was just plain hard, but her faith remained steady.
All of us struggle, I know I do, between what we think life's going to be, what we think God has promised us, what we hope God will give us, and the realities that are before us. And I think it's pretty instructive from her life that she finds peace at the temple.
Nancy has lots of lessons to teach us about staying faithful, even when we're walking through the fire. Her story isn't just pioneer history, it's a mirror for all of us who wonder how to stay faithful when life is hard. I'm your host, Professor John Hilton, and this is Why Religion.
Each year, religion professors at Brigham Young University produce hundreds of publications on subjects related to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This podcast brings this research into one place to enlighten the everyday seeker of truth.
Seek learning, even by study and also by faith.
Interviewing the author, we discuss why the study was done, why it matters, and why the professor chooses to be both a scholar and a disciple. This is Why Religion. Research to enlighten your mind and strengthen your faith in Jesus Christ.
Today, we get to hear Janet Erickson interview her colleague Derek Sainsbury about his recent book chapter, We Have Not Been Allowed the Liberty to Worship as We Please, Nancy Naomi Tracy and the Denial of Latter-day Saint Religious Liberty. I'm excited for this discussion. Let's dive in.
Derek, why did you choose this topic and her?
In doing my research for my dissertation that then turned into this book about the missionaries that served in Joseph Smith's presidential campaign, over a decade of research, I've found that we believed before just a little over 300 had gone out, but I found over 300 more. She was one of them. Her husband, Moses Tracy, is called to go back to their home state of New York, and she has him ask Joseph if she can go along with them to campaign and also to take their grandchildren who've never seen their grandparents. The response from Joseph Smith was yes, and that she would assist him, in Joseph's words, in fulfilling his mission. She takes a little part in the book because she's centered in such a way that at the end of her life, she's looking back on a lot of things. And I always wanted to come back to her. So this book gave me a chance to write a chapter where we look at her and with her, we get a very unique look at the struggle for religious liberty from the Latter-day Saints, because it's being told from the voice of a woman, first of all, that's unique, and the only, as we've said, the only female electioneer in Joseph Smith's presidential campaign, but a woman who continues to be involved in politics with suffrage and as a minor church leader in Relief Society and in other things. And it costs her. It really costs her to continue to stay with the church. And the phrasing that you read, the article for the name of the chapter, those are her words, looking back many, many years later and looking all over her life and all the persecution. And she's basically saying, we've never been given the chance to worship freely.
I was so inspired reading about her life. What a remarkable woman.
Yeah.
And you referenced some of those things, but it would be really powerful just to give us a brief biography of this woman's story.
She's born in 1816 in New York. Her dad fought in the War of 1812. Both of her grandparents fought in the Revolutionary War. Her dad dies when she's very young, and she's shipped off to her grandma and grandpa to be raised by them. And she's very bright, very outgoing. She's a seeker. Her grandmother's a Methodist, and she wants to feel the religion that her grandmother feels, but can never feel it. Very bright. She finishes school at 16, and she decides, I'm going to go back and get to know my mom. And so she goes, moves back to Ellisburg. As soon as she gets there, the school says, we want you to be our teacher. That's how bright she is at such a young age. But to their dismay, she's fallen in love with somebody, and so she gets married instead that year. It's the next year that she hears an LDS missionary, David Patton, and she's convinced. Her husband's not convinced. It takes him another year, but she waits to join, and so they get baptized in 1834, and right away move to Kirtland and say goodbye to their families. Involved in the church there, involved in the beautiful experiences that happen with the Kirtland Temple. Then they feel a call to go to Missouri, and so they ask the prophet if they can go, and he agrees, and they leave. By now, the Saints have already been kicked out of Jackson County as they've tried to build Zion, and Zion doesn't fit very well with its neighbors in America because it's very countercultural. When they get there, they're there for just over a year, and she gives birth to their third child as the Mormon War breaks out. Well, her husband's involved in the Battle of Crooked River. He sees that missionary who converted her, Apostle Patton, be shot, mortally wounded, and die. He's on the run. And so she's alone, sick from this birth, with her three little kids, her 5-year-old being the oldest one. Then Joseph Smith organizes the Relief Society, and she gets to be a part of that. She's invited in one of their early meetings, and she is just in love. It's a social space for her, but also a political space for her, where she can work with other women in organizing things, in voting on things. They send a letter to Governor Carlin about Joseph Smith's character that Joseph credits for saving his life. And so she just loved the Relief Society. As political problems surfaced again, Joseph Smith wrote to the presidential candidates and asked, for help. When none offered, they decided to run Joseph Smith as president of the United States. It's a very serious campaign. It didn't have a serious chance of winning at all, but it was a very serious campaign. And at General Conference, all the elders were told to come and ask for volunteers. And that's when her husband volunteers. And so she leaves with him and their 4 little kids under 11, and they go back to New York and they preach and they politic, first to their families and then to others. And then they receive the news that Joseph Smith's been killed, that he's been assassinated several weeks after, because news travels slow. In my research, there are people that went out on this mission, found that out, and never returned to Nauvoo. And they're right there with their families. I mean, it's a perfect time to bow out, but they don't. They stay and help stabilize the branch through the winter, and then they go back to Nauvoo in the spring. Unfortunately, on that trip, another one of their sons falls ill, and soon after they return to Nauvoo, he passes away.
And so now, as you described so powerfully, there are two sons buried side by side in the Nauvoo cemetery, both as part of the Exodus experiences that they had had.
Exactly.
Having to get kicked out of Missouri, having Joseph's death, and then coming back.
Right.
And now they're going to be, Derek, as you described, have to leave again.
Right. They can't sell their home. They leave. They're part of the tragedy of the Exodus through Iowa. And their second oldest son goes fishing, comes back, burning fever, turns out to be scarlet fever. A few days later, he's dead. So they've lost a third child now. And I wanted to read 50 years later in her narrative, one of her narratives, she says this at this point, right, where she's lost three of her children each time, as you mentioned, after being persecuted. And she wrote, "The saints have sacrificed their homes and their all to satisfy the bloodthirsty appetites of our enemies. May the Lord have mercy on our enemies' souls for their cruelty and wickedness to an innocent and law-abiding people." So she's writing that 50 years later as she looks back and is just upset and devastated by her choice to try and worship the way the Constitution of the United States says she can. Yeah. And instead, the fellow Americans persecute. She's just devastated.
And Derek, it doesn't end there because she goes to Utah. Her husband then dies, as you describe, as the Mormon War, as an army is sent from the United States to push them further. And in that persecution, he gets sick and dies.
Correct.
And not only does she live through that, but then her oldest son, that Henry, that she loves so much, who then ends up as a man who in his 40s getting incarcerated for participating in polygamy, in plural marriage. And then he dies from a sickness contracted there. So you're just describing that her life walks the whole story in a sense of religious persecution. And at the end, right, Utah is a state, and there's a sense of peace and rest. But her story is filled with the whole journey, in a sense.
That's what makes it so powerful, I think, in telling the whole story of, the religious persecution of the church for the first 60 years.
So, Derek, as I'm studying it, I'm thinking, what does she feel about America? What is it? I mean, her grandfathers had fought for religious freedom, freedom to gather, freedom to worship, freedom to express, right? They had established this nation on that foundation. So do you think she experiences America initially as a place of hope and promise for the fulfillment of Zion, and then just betrayal?
She's not alone. I mean, the Latter-day Saints that end up fleeing Illinois, fleeing the United States, feel betrayed. They're no different than their neighbors. They have the same, their grandparents fought alongside their neighbors' grandparents for this land of liberty, and yet the Zion that they were so desperately trying to create led to this friction, which led to this persecution. And when we leave the United States, we believe, and she puts this in her narratives along with many others, that America is leaving with them. The ideas of freedom of religion, the ideas of freedom are leaving with them because America has let them down time after time after time. And so when they come out here to the West, they believe that they're setting up what America's supposed to be.
They brought the truths and the principles, only now they're going to live them as they should be lived, in a sense.
Right. But the reality is there's nobody there but them.
Yeah.
As far as civilization goes, it's really kind of a theodemocracy that gets set up. In other words, the governor of the territory is also the prophet of the church. Yes. And so church leaders are also the local leaders because there's nobody else around. But also it's an idea that they believe in. their view and her view specifically of America was that they failed, and they're going to, they're the ones, the successors to make it work.
Restore again the
Restore it
truths.
again, yeah. And then, right, America takes over, wins the war against Mexico and takes the territory back. And so the idea still is like, we're the best of America. Hopefully we can be that kind of, shining example. And it's not going to work because it looks like theocracy. We've announced plural marriage, and that's going to lead to, another 40 years of conflict where America, in her eyes and so many eyes of the Latter-day Saints, is not on their side.
Really powerful, especially given her background and love for America and deep roots in its founding, and then to be drawn and convicted around this establishing of Zion, and to see America as a totally inhospitable place, right, for this vision. And yet God was watching over her. I think it's so powerful how you describe at the end. She says, this effort to create a Zion, a theodemocracy, as you say, and a life given to that, including yearning to go to Missouri to fulfill its manifest destiny, electioneering for the prophet Joseph Smith, defending the right to practice plural marriage, defending the right to vote, right? And yet this was not the United States of America they were establishing. This was Zion. They had attempted to build a society separate from the world that offered peace and rest to the saints and anyone who wished safety from the prophetic calamities preceding Christ's return. But America had not been the place where that could happen.
Right.
At the end of her life, you have this quote from her daughter-in-law, and it says it's a poem that she must have included in her record.
She did.
And it says, "We are surrounded with lofty mountains, cities have been built and temples reared, the valley blossom as the rose. Fair Utah, she is the queen of the West, where the saints will in peace find rest after decades of persecution." And yet you recognize that conspicuously absent in this poem is Zion, the kingdom of God, the central cause of her generation. They had attempted to build something different. And so Zion would not have been the queen of the West, but the queen of the earth. Their vision of Zion's mission had been outside the boundaries of acceptable religion. She had devoted her life to that cause, and yet saw it, in a sense, as you describe, saw her eyesight dimmed in her final years as they find peace, but not Zion.
Right.
Do you mind just talking about that
Sure.
gap for her?
Yeah, and it's a big gap. She, like many Latter-day Saints, believed that Zion would be prepared in their lifetime, that Christ would return to it. The persecutions of, against plural marriage seemed to be an indicator, that this was going to happen. And when instead it's the manifesto, for her especially, the giving up of political unity, that everybody is supposed to now join the Democrat Party or the Republican Party. As she's writing this reminiscence, right after the state becomes a state, she's pretty hurt. It's not what she had expected. It's not what she had devoted her life to. It's not what 5 members of her family had died for. And while many Latter-day Saints were moving on, it was very difficult for her. And it was also a time of incredible, when people start splitting into the partisan political parties. There's a lot. I mean, you're having Wilford Woodruff in General Conference having to reprimand the Saints.
For the conflict.
And the mean-spiritedness. Mm-hmm. And she is just like, this is not what we gave everything for. And she's hoping and looking for a return to where they're building this physical Zion, this place together. And she's concerned as she watches particularly her grandchildren, trying to dress American, as she puts it, or vote American, or take on American culture. It's not that she's against America. It's just that, like, they've tried so hard to create this separate Holy Zion society, and that's not what ended up happening. So there's this gap between what she thought and worked so hard for and what actually turned out. And there's no sense in any of her writings that she ever loses her faith. In fact, she says there must be these are her words, there must be some unseen policy or reason in all of this. And at the end of her life, she's a little torn by what she had spent her whole life sacrificing for and what became.
Yeah. Okay, and we will come back to that incredible theme. Along the way, you describe this very interesting paradox, at least for the broader world, of here are these women. Of course, they've made it out of far west. They journeyed to Nauvoo. They made it out of there to winter quarters and then finally to Utah. And then they're asked to practice plural marriage.
Yeah.
And she sees that as a call from a prophet of God, central even to this difference, this creating a Zion. And it's so interesting because in this understanding of who they are as women and advocating for their husbands being allowed to live this in religious liberty, then you have women in the East who are thinking, these poor women are so deeply oppressed.
Yeah.
Maybe we should give them the vote, and they'll vote themselves right out of this problematic dynamic. And instead, she and her sisters, right, the women of the Relief Society are having this remarkable affirmation that this is divine and that we should also vote as part of creating Zion.
Right.
They want to be involved politically in this equal effort of establishing Zion. So the paradox, right, of course, is the women in the East are, once we liberate them,
Who can't vote, by the way.
who cannot vote, right, and are advocating for voting for them so that they can change this terrible practice. And they instead are saying this is part of our effort to live Zion and follow a prophet of God. And they do get the vote, right?
Right.
And they vote in line with that theodemocracy, right? They
Right.
vote in line with what you've described as a prophet leading the political leader. And she has this beautiful vision. It would be wonderful to just hear you describe how she saw herself as a woman. And I think it began back when Relief Society was established.
Yes.
There was this clear sense that we are to walk alongside those who hold priesthood offices, men. We as the Relief Society in this work of building Zion and building the kingdom of God on earth. Is that how you experience what she describes?
Absolutely. Her son will look back at when she got to join the Relief Society in Nauvoo and when he's writing his own history and say, like, Mom was really excited about this, right? That this was a big deal. And when they reformed the Relief Societies out west later, they're integral to what the Latter-day Saints are trying to do, not just with politics, but also with home manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And she makes the largest contribution to her local Relief Society of land so they can put in mulberry trees for silkworms. She sees herself as like you said, she talks about that we worked alongside the priesthood brethren in all things. Whether it was creating self-sufficiency at home, whether it was petitioning government, whether it was service. Like you see in the notes, she was in the Marriott Ward Relief Society notes, and she is the star. She may not be the president, but she is the star.
Carrying out the work.
Yes, carrying out the work and teaching the younger sisters everything. And she's the biggest speaker all those years as I went through every meeting. She sees this as part of who she is, that the Relief Society, that a Latter-day Saint woman is more than just what a woman in the Victorian era was to be, at home, raising the kids, queen of the home, but active in building this new society, whether that's through politics, whether that's through religion, whether that's through economics, or this social system of plural marriage that she was in, that when she remarried to her second husband, who happened to be her first husband's younger brother. And you see that all the way through to the end, right, of her life. Her last stuff in her journal is her thinking about the Relief Society sisters she started working with in Nauvoo, continued working with, right? Many of them were general leaders and she wasn't, but they were friends, and they would meet and talk and discuss about what the women's suffrage movement was doing back east. And she raised money for our delegation to be back there to try and beat plural marriage, anti-plural marriage legislation. Her last written thoughts are that she records for us are she can't wait to get to heaven and work alongside those same sisters there. It's quite
so
powerful.
Beautiful, so powerful. You get this sense of how incredibly progressive they were in their
Absolutely.
understanding of women. And like you said, breaking out of the cult of domesticity of that time, honoring their sacred work as mothers and wives, and seeing no limit to all the ways they could help in the great work of God.
If you're interested in more high-quality gospel scholarship, subscribe to the Religious Studies Center digital newsletter. Our bi-monthly newsletter features book reviews, sneak peeks of upcoming publications, as well as timely articles to help you in your personal scripture study. Your inbox will love it. Subscribe for free at rsc.byu.edu/subscribe. We've been listening to Dr. Sainsbury share insights from the life of Nancy Naomi Tracy. In part 2, he discusses principles from her life that can help us in our own.
I want to get back to this theme. What this means for me, what it means for you as we're reading this. And you can't end it without feeling like like an irreconcilability in this gap between this is what we're called to do and called to be and the vision of it. I mean, she'd been there at Kirtland. Heaven had descended on this building. She knew this was the work of God. She knew that Zion was meant to be established, and then to see it, like those dreams and visions kind of broken, fragmented. Just thinking about our own lives, right? And often this discrepancy between where God invites us into and what we're trying to create and what is real in front of us and the challenges that are in front of us. They end up having to kind of settle, in her language, right? To be part of the United States and to come to a place of peace. They have to find compromises in what they might have chosen, but then they have to compromise on in order for that to happen. But as you study her life, do you experience that? Wow, like life really can be this way for us. This gap between what is and what God is calling us into. And what do we do in that space? How do we see it?
I think that's one of the great stories. You picked that out just right or lessons, I guess, of her story. It's interesting because after 1896,
when Utah becomes a state.
When Utah becomes a state, and she is just like totally devastated by the political disunity.
Because they've had to rescind, in her understanding, plural marriage, right? They've had to engage these now political parties. They had to leave the People's Party that was part of this theodemocracy. And now they're having to they have to choose between Democrat or Republican in this two-party system. So they've had to, in a sense, give up. She's feeling like this vision of what we could be.
That's exactly how she feels. After that, from 1896 to 1902, there's only sporadic entries in her journal. And it's interesting to watch over time, over those 6 years, that when she does write, all of a sudden, politics is gone.
It's not any longer a focus.
Yeah, economics is gone. What starts to replace it are entries about marriages of her grandchildren, and especially the biggest thing that she writes about is genealogy work that she's doing. Writing to relatives back east, getting lists of names, and going to the Logan Temple, and then later to going to the Salt Lake Temple. She'd done the Logan Temple earlier. But for me, I find it's kind of interesting because the piece that she gets to, at least in what she left us in her writings, is that this new focus on not gathering to one place, but gathering to the temple. Both sides of the veil. She comes to that in those years following what she saw as the loss of Zion. And she never calls it Zion, but you can tell by the way she talks about her family and about the importance of the temple that she's found this new peace, this, as you were saying, she's reconciled what she thought they were going to do with the reality of where God was also leading them. And yet, as we just talked about earlier, that fire to work alongside the sisters for the kingdom of God in the wider sense that she had spent her whole life is still there. But she's been able to reconcile.
Come to peace.
Interestingly enough, through the temple, through family history. And I think that's a really powerful lesson for us. I think all of us struggle, I know I do, between what we think life's going to be, what we think God has promised us,
Yes.
what we hope God will give us, and the realities that are before us. And I think it's pretty instructive from her life that she finds peace at the temple.
Yeah, that is so powerful.
Right? I mean, it's just, I didn't
This
think about
is
that
the
when I wrote
Zion.
it. Yeah, but
This is the gathering.
Exactly.
Almost like we hear President Nelson's plea, right? When we talk about the work that we need to do, the greatest work going on earth is this gathering into temples on both sides of the veil, as you so beautifully. And here she comes to peace about that.
Yeah.
So I can't help but think this is such a powerful lesson, as you have described, for us. Because here it's as if we have needed as a church this tremendous period of peace given by God for the work to go on,
Correct.
For the gathering to take place, for the gospel to spread throughout the earth, housed in America, as flawed as it is, right? That launched from that place, and a place of peace where that could spread and grow. Temples could be built, an economy that the church could come into funding, right? Have a solid foundation economically from which that could happen.
And even religious liberty, right? So she would say, she would be shocked by how accepted we would be, say, by the 1950s.
Yes.
Where we'd be put up as examples of what it means to be an American.
America's choir, as you referenced, right? Like this is
right.
the church that has America's choir.
Be very foreign to her. But I think what would excite her is what you're talking about, in that religious liberty spreads around the world as freedom and democracy spread across the world. In that time period. And now we have temples across the world, and Zion being built in stakes all around the world, not what she had envisioned.
Yes.
I think it's just absolutely beautiful to think about how little we know.
Yes. About what God is doing.
About what God is doing.
In our own lives and for his whole kingdom.
And and in the end, how better it is than what we had thought.
How much greater, how much larger.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought us to the temple. It's so beautiful to think of Jesus Christ, the great at-one-ment. He is the source of at-one-ment. He is the great reconciler. And to think of the irreconcilabilities of life and in covenant relationship with him, and binding our family into covenant relationship, we find at-one-ment, we find peace, we find him. So beautiful, as you described, to think he has so much more for us in store than as grand as our visions might be. It's as if he's inviting us into a place of deeper trust. Walk with me and see what I can do.
If you're interested in reading the chapter, "We have not been allowed the liberty to worship as we please," we've provided a link to it in our show notes and on our website, whyreligion.byu.edu. It's only available for a limited time, so get there soon. On our site, you can also find additional publications by Professor Sainsbury. But for now, it's time for our last segment, Part 3, where we get a little more personal. Here, Derek shares his personal journey as a religious educator.
Why did you choose to become a religious educator? First as a seminary teacher, and then here at BYU
I had a difficult struggle, particularly in my teenage years, and I had a seminary teacher, Brother Sunwall, who made a huge difference in my life with his act of love. And that, along with the girl I'd met that I'd marry later, turned me towards going on a mission. And I went on a mission and fell in love with the gospel of Jesus Christ, fell in love with Jesus Christ. By the time I'd finished, I had determined that when I came home, I was going to be a seminary teacher. I was going to do for others what Brother Sunwall had done for me. And I was blessed enough to have that happen. A few years into teaching, I had a dream, one of those dreams, those vivid dreams that like stay with you. I don't have very many of them, but I had this one. It was really interesting. I was in some meeting in a hall, going down a row of men, and shaking their hands. And the last one was President Hinckley, who was president of the church at the time. And I shake his hand, and he says, "Oh, yes, Derek Sainsbury from BYU." And I said, no. And you remember President Hinckley. There's just this little twinkle in his eye, and didn't say anything, just a twinkle in his eye. And I walked off, and that's what I remember about the dream. I always thought it was strange. I never thought that I would be to be honest, the caliber of person that would ever be here. So I didn't take it as direction from God or anything like that, just as maybe I ate too much
quirky.
steak.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went through my career, loved it, loved working on the front lines with teenagers as they struggled with life. Then I was asked a few years ago to come down here to BYU on a rotation. They have a few of us come here for a 2-year rotation to help out with the teaching load at BYU. And I got here, and I just absolutely fell in love with the students, the campus, the faculty, everything. And so I applied for positions when they came up, and I was blessed to get hired. The interesting thing that will teach you, has taught me so much about God, is not the fulfillment of the dream, although I could see now God had this planned out all along. The interesting thing has been that while I've been here at BYU, either in rotation or here full time, that who would I have in my class? The son of the seminary teacher. Now listen to this. He and his wife are taking my class when they're struggling with their faith. And of course, their father is so pivotal in my life. I was just like prayers and worked with them, and they're such good people. And they took 2 classes from me. Jeff ended up taking a 3rd. And with his permission, he knows that I share this story, that it helped. It really helped that my work with them blessed them, kept them, in the church, kept them going in the direction that they wanted to. And can you see God in that? What an amazing, how does that happen?
Wow.
30 some odd years later, I'm doing the same thing for my seminary teacher's son. Well, I just have this witness that whether it's this with thing like you, or whether it was the difficulty of my growing up life, or so many other things, that God's in control, and he has a great plan that, if, like you mentioned earlier, if we can trust that, miracles happen. And I would consider the fact that I had the opportunity to repay what had been done for me, and help the Lord do the same thing that the seminary teacher had done for me. I think it's just beautiful, and it just says so much about who God is and what he can do in our lives when we trust him, even if we don't fully understand.
Why do you choose faith? Why have you chosen to be a believer in the restored gospel of Jesus Christ?
I've always, since I can remember, believed God. I've always had that gift of believing that it's real. I wasn't very active in my teenage years. It was lots of difficulty or whatever. And I think my sense of who God was more of a stern, I believed in him, but more of a stern, person, and someone who was disappointed in me, disappointed in different things. And so I went on my mission, and that started to change. It didn't change completely until later in my life. But the joy and love and power that has flowed into my life through those decisions I just can't deny the fact that there is something there more than the six senses or five senses, I guess. I just know it's real, and I know I've come to know that Heavenly Father is real, that Jesus is the Christ. Just this past year, I struggle with mental health issues, and I got a new psychiatrist. I mean, you and I actually talked a little bit about this last year, where I was struggling to feel heaven, even though I'm doing all the things I should be doing. And it's really tough when you're a religious educator to not feel heaven when you're doing all this stuff. But, she has helped me so much. I was talking to one of our colleagues in my office the other day, and I told her I'm 51, and I finally believe it when Jesus says, "I love you. You're forgiven." Oh. And I've finally been able to accept the full love of Jesus Christ, which is just, in these past 5 months, has just been so glorious. My wife, other people just noticed the difference where once I was able to get past my mental health struggles, not that I'm past them, but to figure things out, that my mind has opened up to be able to see more, which is really the definition of repentance, right? The ability to come out of our little mind and see more, and then live that more. And I've always believed. It's been a process of getting to the point where I understand why I believe and what I really believe in. But to me, it's as real as anything. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to all the people that have helped me along the way in my journey to be able to get to the point where I can feel this way.
Thanks for listening to Why Religion. This podcast is a production of Religious Education at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. My name is John Hilton, the host and producer. The Why Religion podcast team also includes professors Phil Allred, Rob Eaton, Jenna Erickson, Casey Griffiths, Jared Halverson, Travis Searle, Hank Smith, and Brad Wilcox. We give special thanks to Leanne Kopus for her work in coordinating all of the podcast logistics. We also sincerely thank our team of brilliant BYU students who create original music, promotional materials, and do the podcast editing and mixing. If you enjoy what you've heard, please like and subscribe to Why Religion and leave us a rating. This really helps others discover the podcast. And join us next time as we continue to bring the everyday Latter-day Saint fascinating gospel studies done by BYU religion professors to enlighten your mind and strengthen your faith in Jesus Christ.